The world stood on the edge of a new era. For decades, the propeller had ruled the sky, carving elegant paths above battlefields and cities. But in the shadowed heart of Nazi Germany, a handful of engineers were daring to cast off the old reign, reaching instead for raw, unimagined speed. It began with whispers, a rumor that the Germans were experimenting with jets, airplanes powered not by piston and propeller, but by pure thrust, their engines swallowing air whole, spitting it out with a violence that might change everything. The shape of the future came together in a secret hangar at Augsburg, 1940. Among wind tunnels and chalk-dusted tables, the Messerschmitt team unearthed their vision, the Me 262. Its lines were sharper, its promise was greater. It was a machine that promised to tear past every enemy the Allies could build. The Me 262's birth was no accident. For years, German scientists theorized about turbojets, struggling with metallurgy, heat, and the quirks of combustion. Willy Messerschmitt, the lead mind behind the project, was both brilliant and controversial, a visionary who believed the future belonged to speed and fire. The prototype was awkward at first, flying in 1941 with a piston engine, then finally roaring with its twin Junkers Jumo 004 turbojets. Engineers watched in astonishment as the Me 262 accelerated past 500 miles an hour, a full 100 miles per hour faster than the best Allied fighters. It was not just faster, it was smoother, quieter, a ghost in the sky, its whistling engines leaving confusion and fear in its wake. But promise invites peril. The German high command, skeptical and wary, delayed jet production for months, sometimes years. Hitler's obsession with bombers and ground attack doomed many prototypes to languish as the war's tide turned. Each day lost would later haunt the Reich. By 1944, the first combat-ready Me 262 squadrons emerged, and the world took notice. The aircraft was dubbed Schwalbe, the Swallow, and for good reason. It soared and struck with a grace no piston-powered fighter could match. 4 devastating 30mm cannons sat in its nose, capable of shredding bombers and fighters alike. Pilots of the new jet were pioneers. Many took their first flight solo, no instructor aboard, trusting manuals and instincts. The Me 262 demanded skill and innovation. A single mistake could turn an engine to molten metal or send the plane spiraling to ruin. When the Allies first faced the jet, disbelief was common. P-51 Mustang pilots recalled their first encounters. The German machine would flash into view, fire, then vanish. No dogfight, no warning, just the sudden eruption of cannon fire and the unsettling quiet as the Me 262 sped away. For a brief, breathless moment, Germany regained tactical air superiority. The Me 262 restored to the faltering Luftwaffe a qualitative edge long lost to Allied numbers and innovation. But this advantage was a glimmer, fleeting and fragile. Technical prowess had its price. The Jumo 004 engines were revolutionary, but fragile and maintenance-heavy. Many Me 262s were lost in training, engines flaming out or exploding during takeoff. Allied bombing raids targeted the jet's factories, slowing production further. Of the 1,443 built, only a few hundred ever saw combat. The dream of the jet did not belong to Germany alone. In England and America, engineers watched, learned, and advanced plans for their own jet-powered fighters. But at war's end, it was the Me 62 that had crossed the line first, a symbol of a future that had arrived, too late to save the regime that spawned it, but soon to reshape the world. In the jet's wake followed new legends. Test pilots daring thin air at 37,000 feet, engineers scribbling secret notes in hidden tunnels, bomber crews rattled by sudden blistering attacks, and a world that realized overnight, in speed, war was born anew. Let me know when you're ready for Part 2, a deep dive into Me 262's combat debut, tactical transformation, and the experience of pilots, friend and foe alike, as they reckoned with the birth of jet warfare. The summer sun of 1944 warmed battered airfields across Germany, but inside secret hangars, something extraordinary was about to take flight. The Messerschmitt Me 262 Schwalbe, Swallow, was no longer a rumor or prototype. Now pilots readied themselves for operations, nerves jangling as they faced the unknown. On July 25, 1944, an Me 262 tore free from the earth and attacked a British Mosquito, becoming the world's first jet airplane to engage in air-to-air combat. The days of piston fighters ruling the sky had ended in a flash of fire and speed. The Reich's top aces, men like Walter Nowotny, Franz Schall, and Kurt Welter, were assigned to the Kommando Nowotny, the Luftwaffe's elite jet trial squadron. The unit's early missions were filled with both promise and peril. The Me-262's raw speed made dogfights obsolete. Allied pilots watched in shock as the German jet streaked past, turning the hunter into the hunted. Combat reports tell of Me-262 pilots approaching bomber streams with a new tactic, climbing well above the formation, then diving nearly vertically through clouds of Mustangs and Lightnings. The approach was a roller coaster, attack from above and behind, then disappear in a shallow dive. Within seconds, the Me-262 could close, fire, and vanish again, immune from the pursuit of old prop-driven rivals. At 870 kilometers an hour, more than 540 miles per hour, the Schwalbe changed the scale of battle. American and British crews felt the threat acutely. Gunners had little time to react. Escort fighters were often unable to intercept the Me-262 before it struck. In the frantic months that followed, the Allies deployed everything they had to counter the jet. Fighter sweeps targeted Me-262 airfields, striking the jets on the ground or during vulnerable takeoffs and landings. Bombers dropped heavy loads on production facilities, sparking devastating fires at key research sites. Still, of the 1,443 Me-262s built, only a few hundred entered combat. Allied attacks and mechanical failures kept their numbers low. The jet's armament gave it the punch to change outcomes. 4 Mk108 30mm cannons, each capable of firing a deadly hail of shells, made quick work of bombers, fighters, and even ground targets. But cannon shells were slow firing, and at the high speeds of the Me-262, hits could be difficult. German pilots had to invent new tactics. They approached bombers from above, slowing at the last moment, timing their shots with terrifying precision. A single volley could shred a B-17, sending it spiraling earthward in flames. American pilots remembered their first encounters. "The 262 came out of nowhere," one Mustang pilot recorded. "I saw a shimmering shape, felt the shock of cannon fire, and then it was gone. I'd never seen anything move that fast or climb that steep." But speed was not the only challenge. The Me-262's engines were delicate, needing careful management. Pilots had to weigh every maneuver, mindful that sudden throttle changes or high-stress climbs could cause a catastrophic flameout. Many aircraft were lost not to enemy fire, but to mechanical breakdown. The Me-262's impact was swift. In a few short months, the Luftwaffe claimed hundreds of victories. Major Walter Nowotny, the unit's leader, scored his last kills in dramatic fashion before engine trouble forced him from the sky and ultimately ended his life when he was caught by Allied fighters during his escape. As the Allies adapted, they developed tactics designed to foil the jet's speed. They patrolled near airfields, pounced when jets were most vulnerable, and coordinated mass assaults to overwhelm the few operational Me-262s. Still, in the hands of masters, the Me-262 was nearly unstoppable once airborne. Missions included bombing runs, reconnaissance flights, and even night fighter sorties. Ace pilots achieved remarkable successes. Franz Schall became the Me-262's top ace, claiming 17 kills. Kurt Welter, operating at night, shot down more than 24 Allied aircraft, including elusive Mosquitoes. The work of the pilots was not just combat, but adaptation. Jet flight demanded new skills, new discipline, and a new kind of bravery. Each mission was a leap into the unknown, for the technology was new and the fate of each flight uncertain. The jet had arrived. The world was changed. And as Germany struggled to outlast the advancing Allies, the Me-262 carved its fierce reputation into the annals of aviation forever. Spring 1945. Germany was unraveling. Cities were rubble, armies in tatters, and hope faded with every sunrise. Yet above the chaos, some warplanes still soared, streamlined shapes moving faster than anything built before. The Me-262 remained Germany's last trump card. Luftwaffe squadrons rushed every available jet into combat, desperate to stem the Allied tide. On March 18th, one of the largest, most desperate air battles of the war exploded over Germany. 37 Me-262s of Jagdgeschwader 7 faced down more than 1,200 Allied bombers and their 600 escort fighters, a sky full of noise and fury. It was a clash of eras and tactics. The German jets dove from altitude, carving vertical streaks through columns of B-17s and Liberators. In barely minutes, Me-262 cannons tore apart 12 bombers and a fighter, the jet pilots vanishing into clouds before Allied Mustangs could intercept. Yet Germany lost 4 of its precious jets in return, a heavy price when each plane was irreplaceable. This was only the start. With every sortie, the Allies adapted. Fighter patrols began circling Me-262 airfields, ready to pounce as the jets lumbered into the air or dropped their landing gear after combat. German pilots responded with their last piston-engine defenders. Focke-Wulf 190Ds roared over runways, engaging Allied fighters and buying valuable seconds for the jets. For Me-262 pilots, takeoff and landing were moments of mortal peril. The Jumo jet engines demanded gentle throttle and long acceleration. Allied Mustangs and Spitfires often claimed their kills against jets caught on final approach, crucial seconds before German flak defenses could open up. In those electric final weeks, Me-262 served every role. Fighter pilots attacked bombers en masse, carving through formations with their 30mm cannons. Ground attack variants strafed enemy troops, trucks, and supply trains near Berlin and Cottbus. Night fighter conversions hunted elusive mosquitoes over the city, using primitive radar, strong nerves, and wheeled sow tactics, free hunting by sight rather than instruments. German claims mounted, hundreds of Allied bombers and fighters downed. But for every victory, supply grew scarcer, fuel ran low, skilled pilots were lost. The Schwalbe could accelerate past 530 miles per hour, climb above Allied formations, turn inside a P-51. Once airborne, the jet was nearly untouchable. But war is not won in theory. It is decided by numbers, resources, and a brutal arithmetic. April brought even fiercer battles. On April 24th, Me-262s hit Soviet vehicles in the Cottbus-Bautzen region. On April 27th, 36 jets flew attack missions against advancing Soviet columns, damaging over 60 trucks but losing 3 of their own to flak and desperate enemy fire. Above Berlin, ace pilots like Franz Schall and Heinrich Baer waged daredevil duels, their Me-262s flashing through bomber streams and low-flying Sturmovix alike. Kurt Welter, flying by night, claimed over 24 kills, his jet cutting a ghostly silhouette against the city's burning skyline. But time ran out. Fuel depots were bombed, factories crumbled, Allied patrols over airfields grew relentless. From March to May, dozens of jets fell victim to strikes on takeoff, landing, or in dogfights, where Allied pilots finally cornered their prey. On May 8, 1945, just hours before Germany's surrender, the Luftwaffe scored its final air victory. Flying a Me-262, Oberleutnant Fritz Stahler downed a Soviet fighter over the Ore Mountains. It was the last poignant echo of the Age of Aces, claimed by a jet marking the end of the piston era and the last breath of Third Reich air power. For the men who flew her, the Me-262 was more than speed and firepower. It was a leap into the future, a terrifying, exhilarating rush. Once airborne, you were invincible, said one pilot, but on the ground, you were hunted. The age of the jet had arrived, but it had come too late. The silence after surrender was thick. Allied soldiers fanned out across Germany, combing through shattered factories, forests, and hidden tunnels. Among the most sought-after prizes, the Messerschmitt Me 262. In hangars, test beds, hidden mines, and even caves, dozens of intact jets sat on their wheels, some never flown, others still smelling of burned fuel and hot oil. Everyone wanted the secrets locked inside the Swallow's silver skin. American, British, and Soviet teams loaded Me-262s onto trucks and ships. Test pilots from every victorious nation flew captive Schwalbes in cautious, hair-raising flights. Some called the Me-262 temperamental, others called it a quantum leap. It was faster and more powerfully armed than any Allied aircraft, its only peers being the Gloster Meteor and soon rival Soviet prototypes. The Americans organized Operation Lusty, a race to gather advanced enemy technology. Engineers and pilots, among them Watson's Whizzers, flew Me-262s from Germany to France and then across the Atlantic. In their hands, the Me-262 revealed wonders and warnings. Its engines were fragile, but its speed unmatched. Its controls light and responsive, its 21st century silhouette unmistakably ahead of its time. Tests showed the jet reaching 540 miles per hour, outpacing everything except the most modern rocket planes. British pilot Captain Eric Brown called the Swallow the most formidable aircraft of World War II. Not perfect, but transformational. The Me-262's swept wings, streamlined body, and engine placement would echo in every Cold War design. The Soviet MiG-15, the American F-86 Sabre, the British Meteor and Hawker Hunter, the French Mystère, and beyond. Engineers dissected every detail. The Me-262's axial flow Jumo 004 jet engines, its elegant but practical gear, its modular armament. The Soviets produced the Sukhoi Su-9, inspired by the Swallow's lines. American and British companies poured the lessons from their German captures directly into the turbojet age. Even Germany's old rivals respected the Me-262's impact, and sometimes flew it in testing for years to come. Czechoslovakia secretly fielded surviving Me-262s into the early 1950s. In Israel, if rumors are true, Me-262 airframes purchased from Czechoslovakia may have made up the first generation of Israeli jets, helping secure survival in a new and dangerous world. But the jet's legacy is more than blueprints and hardware. The Me-262's brief, explosive arrival forced a complete rethink of what air war meant. No longer could speed and altitude alone guarantee survival. Tactics, technology, and training would need to evolve with every passing year. Messerschmitt engineers tried to push even further, planning test models that might punch through the sound barrier, diving past Mach 0.86, even designing versions that would skirt the edge of transonic flight. But in the chaos of war, vision always ran up against shortages of time, of fuel, of lives. Beneath all the technology remained a human story, of engineers working through bomb raids, of pilots risking everything just to take off, of captured laborers enduring the nightmare of forced production in tunnels like Gusen II, where tens of thousands perished for the promise of tomorrow. Museums today guard the Me-262's ghostly forms. Reproductions, built with modern engines, roar over air shows, their shark-like noses and tense, swept wings a living echo of the moment when everything changed. The Swallow did not win the war for Germany. It arrived too late and in too few numbers. Yet it changed all wars afterward. Every jet today carries a fragment of its spirit, a story of how, in the darkest hours, a handful of dreamers and survivors looked beyond the present and made the world's future run faster, higher, farther. The Messerschmitt Me 262 was not just the world's first operational jet fighter. It was the doorway through which the age of propellers gave way to the reign of fire and speed.